Yes, exactly. Right. So good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the IFAD Pavilion. My name's Sarah Bagobunu. I'm the Regional Director, and sorry for this pillar here. It seems that we didn't get it quite right. So for those of you just behind the pillar, please move to your right so that we can see you and you can see us. This is a really exciting session, and I have a really exciting set of panelists here today. What we want to discuss is the future of food and how to sustainably keep our plates full. I think this is one of the key challenges of our time. So this is a very critical discussion. I cannot emphasize more why it is so critical. It gives me great optimism to see the links between food security, climate, biodiversity, and livelihoods being recognized at the center at this global conference, and that they're not treated as different aspects, completely unrelated, but they are actually integrated under the overarching goal of a sustainable food systems transformation. So this session is really meant to engage, and I would like to take then this opportunity to introduce you to our exciting set of panelists that we have here today to discuss this important point. And I would like to first of all introduce the Managing Director of UNIDO, and I know he is not sitting directly in front of you, but so Gunther, welcome very much to this session. He'll actually give us our opening remarks. for today. And moving swiftly on, we also have, as a set of our panelists today, representative of the Netherlands government joining us. And this is Peter Cooper, who is a Senior Climate Officer, Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Netherlands. We also have Jay Collins, Vice Chair, Citibank, and we also have Jason Spensley, Senior Climate Change Specialist for the Green, for Jeff, basically. We all know what Jeff is in the same time. And finally, but not least of all, we have Marina, if I can say Punicino, is that correct, Fieldman? A Country Engagement Director for the NDC Partnership, who will also be here giving us some closing remarks. So this is a set of our panelists today. And if I just may then very quickly move on and invite the Managing Director of UNIDO, Mr. Gunther, to give us the, let's say, opening statements and the background of this important conversation. Please, Gunther.
Yeah, thank you, Sarah. Thank you so much, and good morning from my side. I just arrived. I told Sarah just arrived this morning from Vienna, and I'm very glad to be here. And I want to thank the colleagues from IFAD that I have the possibility to say some opening remarks. And of course, global food systems, I think most of you stay longer here than me. You heard a lot of tremendous stress for our food systems, not only because of climate crisis, but also because of disruption of supply chains and unsustainable production and consumption models. And millions of people around the world are paying the price for how we use resources in the north, and people in the global south are the hardest hit. The United Nations estimates, that's also not new for US experts, that around 735 million people suffer from hunger, and almost 3 billion people cannot afford a healthy diet. The current model of food production and consumption leads to widespread environmental degradation, climate impacts, and diet-related diseases. And the global food system is responsible, I think it's also not new for you, for about a third of human-caused emissions. And 8 to 10% of our carbon dioxide emission is related to food waste and losses. This is also a figure from FAO, while 60% of deforestation is due to agriculture, commodity production, and land use change. But we can get to grips with all these challenges. We have the know-how, we have technical knowledge, and we have resources to get these challenges under control. We just have to finally move from talking to action. And yes, we have financial resources to make massive investment needed to tackle the challenges. The global food system represents a huge business and investment opportunity with an estimated asset value of 14 trillion US dollars, equivalent to around nearly 20% of the global GDP. Unfortunately, much of hundreds of billions of dollars invested in food systems each year is misspent, leading to negative outcomes and a hidden social, economic, and environmental costs of 12 trillion US dollar. And nearly 2 trillion US dollar is spent on environmentally harmful subsidies, with food systems receiving only 3% of the total public climate funding. So it's imperative that we put people before profit when building food systems. This includes both scaling up and accelerating existing investments and using innovative financial instruments such as blended finance, and this is the topic today, to attract much needed funding, and which we want to focus today in this roundtable. Blended finance has the potential to play a critical role in building resilient food systems by leveraging the strengths of both the public and private sectors. By addressing the financial, technological, and structural challenges facing the food and agriculture sector, blending finance can contribute to a more sustainable, secure, and inclusive global food system. And we, as UNIDO, we are committed to promoting benefits of blended finance solutions. Our projects, joint initiatives, and innovation hubs demonstrate how public development funds can be used to de-risk SDGs compliance private sector investments in agri-food systems through equity and loans. We as UNIDO, we stand ready to work with our partners from international organizations and UN sister agencies to international financial institutions and DFIs, to national financial institutions and the private sector to build more sustainable food systems and to ensure that all our plates are sustainably filled. With our expertise in reducing post-harvest losses, for example, and increasing local value addition, combined with expertise in blended finance mechanism, we ensure that developing countries in particular get a fair deal and that no one is left behind. So once more, I thank IFAD, my colleagues, for inviting me today, and I look forward to today's discussion on this topic and exploring how we can work with you all in this endeavor. Thank you very much once more.
So, thank you very much for those opening remarks. I think we got some very important sound bites from Mr. Gunther, where he mentions a series of important aspects in order to keep our plates full sustainably. Notably, he was talking about financing, the importance of smart financing, the importance of targeted financing, the importance of innovation he brought up to the fore. And he also brought the importance of targeting smallholder farmers in those innovation flows. But it's not only about innovative technologies, but it's also about innovative finance and the role of the private sector. So thank you very much for those insightful thoughts and really the calls for partnership for different types of actors to come together, looking at food systems through a very different lens. I think the urgency, he mentioned that. So now to our esteemed panelists, and if I may start with the private sector, with Jay Collins, and pose my question. So Jay, Citi recently launched a report focusing on the food-water climate nexus. What are the key messages of this report that could attract private sector financing for implementing an integrated approach in this area? Could you provide an example of innovative financing instruments that could be effectively scaled up for this purpose? I know it's a long question, but over to you.
And do all of that in 2 minutes?
No. I gave you a good 5 minutes for that. We're really excited to hear from you.
Wonderful. So first of all, let me thank you for including Citi in this discussion today. It's absolutely critical, and I won't repeat the overarching theme of why we're here, which is just this extraordinary food system crisis and what's happening, because you've heard already how bad the numbers are, how disturbing, whether it's food, water, climate nexus, and fundamentally what is wrong with the food system. But let me focus really on the financial solutions, and I would encourage you all to read Liz Kermey's recent report on the food, water, climate nexus. because it really looks at how stressed the food system is today, but also where it's going, and I assure you it doesn't get better unless we act. A couple of things. First, in the agricultural space, we have to connect to fund. So what do I mean by that? We have a plethora of extraordinary ag tech, water tech solutions that are empowered by data and connectivity. So if we can get farmers and farm ecosystems to connect, we can connect data, and data empowers. Right now, you can run a small, medium, or large farm in the United States with your phone, right? The number of ag tech solutions that are available out there to farmers that monitor everything from water to pesticides to what is happening in terms of the soil on their farm. Literally anything in the farm ecosystem, we have new ag tech technologies that can be applied. The data that is used for that and the ability to analyze that data and act upon it requires connectivity. But most importantly is you then can fund off the back of it. You can deliver all kinds of solutions. You get better data and then insurance can act. You can get working capital funding because you can actually demonstrate the productivity of the farm and the improved productivity over time. So the financial ecosystem can come in not only with alternative payment mechanisms, but a series of funding solutions in and around that data. Second, blended finance. So we all talk about the failures to really blend at scale. But we're also failing to blend, and we were just talking about this at scale in the adaptation space, and really to understand blending, as IFID has been working with us on, is to understand how to blend closer to the farmer and to involve the farmer, the co-ops in that system. But let me just give you some examples. We think that we, the financial community, should be working on blending structures with local agricultural banks in the emerging markets, meaning that we co-finance and lend into them because they have that local farmer customer and client, but we have to do so with the risk mitigation that we're all talking about here at COP. And that means first loss structures. That means to be more flexible with speed in a lot of the guarantees that are available to us. So think what we call breach of contract protection, a variety of those that allow for those local banks that bank the agricultural communities to take scaled finance from global banks like Citi, but to put them into structures that have risk mitigation, either loss absorption of a grant, concessional lending of an MDB, or MEGA-like guarantees. And we're just too slow and not nimble enough to do these fast enough. Let me talk about partnerships, because I think partnerships is a third part of this recipe. When you don't have something right where you can take a pilot and replicate at scale, you need to have a partnership to experiment, right? And I think what we're doing with IFID is a great example of looking on what is really creative and what could be made to work. Bringing in fast-moving consumer companies, the companies that actually have the potential to structure offtake agreements. And again, if you think of the features of the financial system, for those of you that aren't familiar with it, that's important is if let's say farmers or a co-op or even a weak credit jurisdiction agricultural bank don't have the ability to attract scaled finance. If you have a strong credit player in the food system that commits to an offtake, to purchase, and preferably longer term than what we're seeing, longer term, medium term offtake agreements, this allows banks to fund better into that because you know that someone will be buying that, and that becomes more financeable. But what we have to do in terms of these partnerships, like I mentioned with IFED, is really to design these so that we can hit a replicate at scale, fund at speed button on that. And we are working also with the World Food Program on partnerships to try and bring in those companies that have the advanced technologies in this water, food, climate nexus to be able to do that. And then, finally, I want to say a quick word about how we're going to have to put this funding to work with the major players in targeted segments where we know, and in this report we talk about the breakdown that's coming. And what's interesting is that we have the technologies now to project out the food and water ecosystem where it gets really bad over time. And one of the things that Liz did in her report is to look out at staple crops, which really feed the world, and the concentration of countries where that production is, and to project out with geospatial data and projections on climate where we will have water stress that will shut that down. And her report is projecting countries that, like Brazil, for example, where that water, food, climate nexus will cause global, not in those countries, but global staple crop crises if we don't act and do something about this. So there is, as is everything here at COP in the climate space, a need to prioritize. And this report, I think, is a good example of starting to think about priorities. So I'll stop there.
No, thank you very much. A lot of food for thought here. We know that Brazil is our current global world basket, feeding lots and lots of countries, also in East and Southern Africa, West Africa, importing even chicken from Brazil. So this is worrying. If this is a trend, and we do need to act now. So thank you very much for that. So I turn to Jason next. And Jason, Jeff has successfully approved 20 adaptation innovation projects through its challenge program, and including innovative financing modalities like equity investments, private sector loans, and blended finance. So you're doing the whole gamut. In light of this, how can adaptation financing further attract private sector financing? So we're talking about leveraging here, especially in food systems. Could you elaborate on specific innovative financial mechanisms or business models that have shown potential for broad adoption and scalability?
Thank you, and thank you for the invitation to this really insightful event. Thank you for joining us pretty early in the morning towards the end of this COP28. For adaptation and resilience, less than 3% of the funding that's tracked is coming from the private sector. More than 97% is public finance. We also know the massive scale of the urgency and the need. The adaptation finance gap is estimated now in a report that's just come out from UNEP to be $387 billion a year in developing and emerging economies alone. Staggering. And it's not just about the gap, it's the need to transform our economies, our financial system for adaptation and resilience. So how can we do this on public finance alone? It's impossible. It's physically, it's scientifically, financially impossible. We need to be really strategic about how we use precious public finance, multilateral finance, and other forms of public finance, including through the GEF, Global Environment Facilities, and others, Green Climate Fund, Adaptation Fund, to blend, to partner with, to connect, and to help catalyze, de-risk sources of private finance. Because public finance is, let's be honest, it's a finite resource. Private finance, we like to think a little bit less so. So let's be strategic, let's be purposeful. One of the ways, and thank you for the question, so I'm so happy to be following City on the panel. One of the ways, a great question, that the GEF has approached this is called the Challenge Program for Adaptation Innovation, because we need more models. We need more examples, especially in the adaptation, resilience, and nature-based solutions space. We need to unearth and communicate and scale up the models, the innovative financing models, the blended financing models for adaptation and resilience, especially in the agriculture and food systems sector. So we embarked on a journey a couple of years ago to go directly to the innovators, whether they're in the private sector or think tanks or universities, to hear their ideas and to support them. And we called the Challenge Program for Adaptation Innovation. We received a beautiful avalanche, a richness of an avalanche of ideas. Each round, we only put it open for a month, and we received over 400 submissions in each round. We're now moving to the third round with good support from the Netherlands and others, thank you. Over 400, which really underscores the message that the barrier to innovation in this space is not a shortage of ideas. It's not a shortage of potential and interest. It lies otherwhere. Often it's enabling conditions. That could be a whole topic for another panel. And we unearthed all sorts of exciting ideas about getting funds to smallholder farmers especially, to the front lines of resilience and nature-based solutions and mitigation. Things like working with financial service providers in country, localized, to get accessible credit in the hands of smallholder farmers to transition to climate resilience and nature-based solutions. Or working with blended finance investment vehicles to scale up the scale of financing needed. We've been delighted to partner with IFAD as well as UNIDO on these, and others, including FAO, on these projects. Just to give a quick flavor, working on certifying lending products for adaptation, resilience, and nature-based solutions with BNP Paribas, Fundación Grameen Crédit Agricole. So we're not going down the road of greenwashing when we say we're developing a lending product for adaptation and resilience. It's rigorous, based on criteria, based on a common currency. Creating guarantees, thank you for mentioning guarantees, where we can provide a de-risking guarantee so that we can provide lines of credit with private capital for smallholder farmers to transition at accessible terms, because the guarantee we provide then passes on some of the accessibility to the smallholder farmers with more favorable terms. Systematizing the credit decision-making processes so they're more efficient, which therefore improves speed as well as terms. Creating investment funds with a fintech investment fund. This is with UNIDO, Catalyst Fund it's called, powered by BFA Global. And I could go on, a whole series of innovative models, which we need much more of. We're looking to do a third round of this in early 2024. I'd love to go into details about each model, but I think we'll leave that for another time. Thank you.
So thank you very much for that, Jason. I think lots of exciting examples of what is already happening and what we can bring to scale. I'd like to pose our last question to Peter, to just ground in for us what these possibilities, experiences of city, combined experiences of Jeff mean to us. So how do the key messages of the white paper on investment needs for water-resilient food systems launched by IFAD and NDCP align with the priorities of the Netherlands? I think there's a microphone next to you there. Oh, okay. Thank you.
Well, thank you for the question, and thank you for being here. My voice is a bit cracky because I've been here 2 weeks, attending so many sessions, speaking to so many people, so apologies for that. Thank you for being here, and thank you for this panel and the good question. How do we feed the population amidst all the crises? I think that's a huge challenge. As the Netherlands, as you may or may not believe, we are the second largest exporter of agricultural produce in the world. And we're a pretty tiny country after the US. So we have highly sophisticated farmers that are able to really produce high yields. But we have challenges on that, a lot of debate in terms of their footprint. So yes, we need to see if we can transform that technology. As the Netherlands, we're not only good in agriculture, but we're also a low-lying delta, a very fertile piece of land. So we have a lot of water that we need to manage. And when it comes to adaptation, it's actually these two things. Without water, you can't grow anything. And so it's that kind of technology, that kind of knowledge that we have, that we also focus on within our foreign trade and aid policy. So as the Netherlands, we spend about 1.4 billion climate finance annually. And of our public finance, more than half of it goes to adaptation. And we do a lot in the food and agri sector, with a big focus on, again, on adaptation. And the stuff that we support, and I think it touches very good up on the white paper. For those of you who haven't read it, it's really worthwhile. Our focus is really about reaching those that need most, the most vulnerable groups, and you know, so getting the benefits to the smallholders. We have a focus in our foreign aid policy. We focus on smallholders, so that's the primary target group. So how can we, with what Joe said, with the technologies, how can we increase their yields and also bundle the investments? We're a big partner of the NDCP, so the strengthening of NDCs, of national adaptation plans, but also of the food system pathways. We have these different type of planning processes in place, which are sometimes a bit complex, but they're needed. And the priorities that are reflected in these NDCs, in these NAPs, the national adaptation plans, but also in this food system pathways, those are the priorities that then we need to attract financing. So how can we match what countries need at national, subnational level with finance? Then about the bankability. We need to find ways in attracting different partners, different investors, different finance mechanisms. And quite frankly, we heard the big numbers that are needed. From the Dutch perspective, we're trying to look at as many different avenues as we can. I wouldn't say betting on multiple horses, maybe putting your eggs in multiple baskets in the case of food, but really also looking at you know, a lot of diversification. So seeing what works and probably maybe even, you know, experimenting a bit, going the extra mile. And as the Netherlands, we would need to take more risk from the public side, take more risk so we can de-risk for investors in the private sector. So that blending part, de-risking, looking at public-private, where we can use public funds to attract different types of investors, because when we talk about investors, there's a lot of different categories. I think these are all reflected in the 4 Bs of the white paper, and they align very much with the Netherlands' priorities. And in terms of the investments pathways that are also mentioned in the white paper, in terms of looking at regenerative agriculture, because that's a big part. A lot of the agriculture is actually depleting the soils. it's needed to restore landscapes, to increase fertility, soil productivity. So we're looking at that. We're also looking at creating a bit of a landscape approach, so not investing here, investing there, and then investing somewhere else, but looking at a little bit more from a basin level or a landscape level, working with different actors, and then providing patient and long-term funding. We're in this for the long run. And I'll maybe just use one example, and then I'll pass it back to the moderator, but the Dutch Fund for Climate and Investment, we just talked about that. That's a fund where we use public finance to leverage private capital. And it very much relates to all that I've said. So looking at the bankability of projects, a lot of the times they are not bankable, but we know they're there. So the DFCD is a partnership with our development bank, FMO. Climate Fund Managers is managing the fund, so they're the asset manager. And then there's two partners that are grounded, WWF and SMV. And they basically, they have a network of partners, and they provide a part of that pipeline which then needs to be developed further. So that's one of the examples that I would like to give. So back to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that. I think it's really, really, really interesting when we want to talk about monetizing nature, monetizing and putting a value to biodiversity, trying to monetize and even capitalize on smallholder value, the total value stream, and the paying actually the right price and the right cost and value for food. That also brings around different dynamics, particularly now in the context, economic context, where we're living with rising inflation and rising food prices globally, which is really the root of causing instability. So all this really comes round to it. But I just want to take this moment to just say, make a small announcement on our side, because it ties in very well with what Peter just said. IFAD and the NDC partnership have been working on a report that is really trying to get the attention of policymakers, get the attention of all types of investors, from the public as well as to the private sector. And this report, we'll hear a little bit more about it from Marianne, is really trying to give you a framework of what sustainable investment looks like and what water resilient, climate resilient investments look like. Because for a long time, we have just been focusing on productivity without looking at the health of our aquifers, without looking at the health of our soils, without looking at multiple returns on investment, which don't just look at the profit margins. So how can we change our lens, our investment lens, and look at things differently? And I think this report, which is just being launched, if I understand well, with this forum in the presence of all of you here, is going to give you little pointers on what you should look at if you want to put food and to feed populations sustainably now and in the very immediate and short term. So I really encourage all of you to look at that report because it is informative, it gives you a guideline, it gives you a different lens of screening multiple factors. Of course, it makes our world more complex, but the complexity should not frighten us. I think it's challenging us to actually come up with better and responsible solutions. So with that, I would just like to invite Marianne to, sort of ground this whole very interesting, exciting discussion on blended finance for us this morning. Please come to the fore.
Good morning. On behalf of the NDC Partnership, it's a pleasure to be with you today. My name is Mariana Panuncio Feldman. I am Director of Country Engagement for the NDC Partnership. And first, I want to start by thanking IFAD for organizing this event and for all three speakers for sharing your perspectives. And what I want to share with you today is in the context of the work that the partnership has been doing collectively, but also, as was just being mentioned, the paper that we have just launched on an integrated investment framework for climate adaptive and water resilient food systems. So just briefly in terms of what the NDC partnership is, for those of you who don't know, the NDC partnership is a global coalition that brings together more than 120 developing and developed countries with close to 100 international institutions. Basically, all of them working together to deliver on ambitious climate actions to help deliver on the Paris Agreement and drive sustainable development. Basically, what makes the partnership quite unique is that the partnership works with developing member countries, focusing on understanding what their priorities are, helping articulate those priorities based on either the need to set up their NDCs, their climate commitments, or then implement them and what they need specifically to implement them, and then turn those requests, share them with all of our partners to mobilize and leverage their resources and their expertise. So effectively what we do is by working with our partners, we develop a tailored package of expertise, finance and support for our member countries. And basically what we do through that is we develop a collaborative response that allows our member countries to access resources more efficiently. So with that, let me turn to the topic of that we're discussing here today. And as it has been mentioned by other speakers, the fact that water scarcity and water hazards are deeply exacerbated by climate change, and they have significant impacts on the world systems, as we've been discussing, and that the only way to overcome these is really to do what we've all been discussing, which is a transformation of food systems into systems that can be climate adaptive and water resilient. And in that sense, the question of how finance not only recognizes that, but values that is absolutely critical, because the transformation is only going to happen if it is underpinned by investment at scale. So this issue of structured investment approaches that tackle sustainable water management, climate resilience, and agricultural productivity in an integrated manner, while demonstrating a positive return on investment, is critical to accelerate the implementation of climate commitments that countries have through their nationally determined contributions, and as countries are looking to enhance their ambition to be reflected in the next round of nationally determined contributions that countries are going to be presenting by 2025. And so in that sense, the paper that we just launched is aiming to share some thoughts on how to structure an investment approach that prioritizes long-term sustainability over short-term gains while balancing agricultural productivity with ecosystem preservation. And so the question is, how do we crowd private investment that is needed to support the kind of food systems that we've been talking about? And in that sense, Peter was speaking, structuring his reflections on the priorities of the Netherlands, very much tied with the structured investment approach that we were outlining in the paper. So let me just speak to that briefly. We basically, in that paper, identified 4 main components that together can tackle some of the critical structural and design level barriers for sustainable food systems. And for simplicity to jog our memory, they've been named the 4 Bs, which are benefit sharing, bundling, building for bankability, and blending. And so let me just briefly speak to the 4 of them. So the first one is benefit sharing, and it basically focuses on the need to ensure equitable access to resources, ensuring that the most vulnerable to climate impacts reap the benefit of these projects. And IFA definitely has a focus on that. Peter was speaking about this as a priority of the Netherlands. The city representative and GEF also were mentioning the importance of focusing on these on smallholders as absolutely critical. And for that, it is not just saying deliberately we're going to focus on them, but it needs to be underpinned by multi-stakeholder governance, data analysis, policy coordination, and impact measurement that helps track whether through these projects, we are actually addressing the inequalities that we see in food systems. The second piece, the second component is focused on bundling. And so this question of how we aggregate and prioritize investments based on a cost-benefit analysis, and we align them with nationally determined contributions, with national food systems pathways, with national adaptation plans. If we can do that, if the projects can deliberately show the connections with those, then we can ensure that multiple benefits and multiple opportunities are being leveraged through these projects. The third piece is building for bankability. And this is an area where, as the NDC partnership, we've been, in addition to the connection between NDCs and sectors, which has been a significant focus for us, is this question of how we work with countries, not just to focus on the design of projects, but also to look more broadly at investment planning so that funding can be mobilized at scale. And so this third component around building for bankability really focuses on what we are seeing as a critical need to have a comprehensive approach when countries are thinking about mobilizing finance, and that it definitely applies to scaling up the finance for sustainable food systems. So issues related to sound planning and policy coordination, which can improve the enabling environment and resource predictability, mapping financial resources and targeting strategic partners early can build a long way in ensuring that the design and then the structuring and the implementation of those projects can advance. The fourth component, the 4B, is the blending, and that one is focused on, as was mentioned by our previous speakers, the need to really maximize the use of public finance in the most strategic way to leverage private sector resources, private capital. So this conversation with investors, the blending of private and public funds so that projects that might otherwise be deemed too risky or can be supported. And I think that this is particularly important in the context of our conversation, given that still natural capital, conservation, restoration are not valued in a financial sense in the way they need to. So how this is incorporated and supported through blended private and public funds is critical. So ultimately, we think that these four components, structured approaches to tackle some of the challenges to supporting sustainable food systems is a way that would allow can contribute to maximizing investment use and return while building the resilient and sustainable food systems that we need, and helps scale up climate finance mobilization overall. So I think that this conversation is absolutely critical for the food, for the agriculture sector, but I think that it is also very important in the broader context of the conversations that we're having here at the COP. Because right now, we are working with countries who are trying to implement their current NDCs. They are currently, we are working with numerous countries on investment plans that are looking to identify costs and prioritize critical investments that have been identified in the NDCs. And countries right now, we have a thematic call that is focused on supporting countries develop new NDCs. We're talking with them in terms of how are you going to structure your next NDC? And this question of implementability, meaning how do you make your NDCs more concrete, but investability as well. We're coming up, inventing new words, if you notice. The English language is evolving in real time at the COP. Is a critical question. How do you make NDCs not just broad policy documents, but documents that are underpinned by clear priorities and are underpinned by investment planning that can then really inform the mobilization of finances at scale. So this is a critical moment for us to be having this conversation for the agricultural sector, but also it can inform the conversations for the COP overall. Thank you very much.
So I just want a last round of applause for all of our esteemed panelists as we're coming to the close of this session. I know that we have also, you have all been waiting to ask your burning question. We've had the closing remarks from Mariana, and I know the panelists as well need to dash off elsewhere, but I will take one or two burning questions. Over to you. I don't know if you have the mic.
Thank you for the very interesting presentation and discussion. My name is Hasib, I'm with Climate Focus, and I had a question, and that is, how can any amount of investment, whether it's blended finance or private or public in food systems, match the amount of finance and subsidies that make food from Europe, food from US, Canada, and places competitive in the global food system? Yeah, how can any investment match that subsidy, which is 700 billion, to allow global South countries and their farmers to become, competitive with these subsidized prices in the global North? Thank you.
Is that a general question to any speaker?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll take a second question right here and a third one, just here to the gentleman here, as they gather their thoughts. Please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you for IFAD to organize this event, and thank you for the speakers for their contribution. I am Al-Arabi Hamdi from Arab Authority for Agricultural Development and Investment. We are now conducting a feasibility study through IFAD to establish a revolving fund. And we want to take advantages from this event to promote this event and the possibility to cooperate with other financial institutions. This is the first one. The second one, what's the mechanism that IFAD is applying now for the smallholders to promote the techniques adapted for climate change in very small farmers in African countries, for example? How the access and infrastructure there, it's well known. How to success to go there, and to reduce the impact of climate change on the smallholder.
Thank you very much, and I'll take a last question at the back there. And please, panelists, speak to any of those questions. Oh, you have a mic here.
Thank you. My name is Meryl from the Stop Financing Factory Farming campaign. In complementing the question about subsidies and incentives, how can you guarantee that money stops flowing to the most damaging forms of food production, like industrial livestock production?
So, did you hear the last question? Okay. Can you just repeat that and come a bit closer, please, so that you're not behind the
Sorry for that. My name is Meryl from Vandermark from the Stop Financing Factory Farming campaign. And I'd like to ask, in line with the question on subsidies and incentives, how can we make sure that money stops flowing to the most damaging forms of food production, like industrial livestock production?
Yes, please go ahead.
I'm happy to start, and because I really appreciate the questions, especially on subsidies and perverse subsidies. It's pretty clear, there's been a number of reports that the single greatest opportunity to address the biodiversity or nature finance gap is by removing perverse subsidies for the food systems and across the spectrum. Perverse subsidies are like shooting yourself in the foot when we're trying to run a marathon. Some hope that I take is last night in this COP, in the 10th or 11th hour of the COP, we did achieve a joint declaration on nature and climate synergies from the COP presidency of CBD, of climate change. Thank you to the leadership of parties that signed on to this. I see a representative of Canada in the room. So we need to address perverse subsidies, crucial. My boss, Carlos Manuel Rodriguez, the CEO of the GEF, refers to this as policy alignment. We're talking about addressing nature and climate challenges and risks and impacts in food systems. Well, let's look at our perverse subsidies that are shooting ourselves in the foot and work on them one at a time, remove them, make the case, make the economic case, the financial case. Thank you.
Jay,
Sure.
go ahead, please. Thanks.
I'll just add to that. I think, if we look at how broken the food system is, you have to start with a net assessment of the subsidies. And the subsidies oftentimes are counterproductive in so many ways. But importantly, you have to put a multiplicity of prisms on the subsidies again to say, have they been updated for technology and productivity, and what are they doing, whether it's between the global south and global north, of creating disincentives in the system that the trade system is trying to counterbalance and that the financial flow system is trying to counterbalance. So we don't have policy alignment, like you said, but importantly, we don't have a climate prism or a health prism put on top of the subsidies. And if you do that, you kind of immediately see that you're subsidizing for one purpose over here, and you have a massive setback in another vein over there. And it's similar to the fossil fuel subsidies that we're seeing as we're trying to throw money at mitigation solutions that just make no sense. So couldn't agree more. And then, but to the question on scaling these solutions to farmers, I think we do have in the agricultural adaptation space and a technology adoption problem. I think we have to fundamentally have a way to capacity build around the realm of what is viable to get farmers to understand what is appropriate technology that can be scaled, that could radically change yields, productivity, financeability. And so often, what I don't understand is, as I look and I talk to the ag tech players in the US that are just doing this innovation that's extraordinary, and I say, well, why can't we get farmers in the global south to adopt these? Part of it, though, also is, and it's chicken and egg, is we do have to have the financing models that enable that as we sit and talk about it, because you can't just say, oh, here, adopt this technology. But Joaquin, my partner over here, and I were talking about this morning about asset-light models, service models versus asset models. So, for example, a lot of these solutions have some type of hardware, right? That is required. You'll come in with a precision ag model. There's often a upfront hardware, and farmers don't have the confidence that they really need that hardware purchase. Well, what we need to do is flip it so that they pay for a service, and they don't pay for the hardware up front. That means really that the banks and the financial community, the ag community, has to fund the deliverer of that product and service in a model where the funding is at their level, usually a higher credit entity. So take a Rivalis, right? Instead of having, which is one of the leading drip irrigation players in the world, we have to figure out how to fund them so that they can deliver as a service their product faster at the weaker credit end of the spectrum, as opposed to trying to get the co-op to fund that. And so anyway, adoption of ag tech solutions, precision ag solutions that are available to us is a problem, and it requires the partnership and the funding models and the innovation to be able to do that.
If I could, just quickly add, I think these two are really good questions. So the perverse incentives, by the way, this is not just in the agri sector. We have perverse incentives everywhere. In fact, the Netherlands just launched yesterday mapping how much of our subsidies are still going to fossils, right? In the Netherlands, we had a whole discussion about this. 45 billion in the Netherlands alone. to fossil fuel subsidies. If we use that money for other means, that'd be great. So the same is for in this sector. There's so many perverse incentives. Mapping them, and then understanding. But we need to, it's all about competition. So we need to then have a common approach of how we do this. And this is where obviously it becomes complicated. But it's a big issue still, and it needs to be out there, and we need to work on it. So I think it's a very good thing that people are asking about it, and it's a very good thing we should put it on the negotiations table. It's not an easy fix, but that's the bad news. On your point, sir, I think this is very interesting. We focus on smallholders, and I think there's a mismatch still between big money and small farmers. That doesn't really work. We need to fix that. So the big tech things, the high-tech solutions that we have in the Netherlands don't work for the smallholder farmers in the global south. But where there is this opportunity is to bring that big money into the water and capital-intensive agriculture. So can we make it work for horticulture? Can we find solutions for that space to really get it going?
So thank you very, very much. I think that was very clear, looking at the sector, looking at the commodity, looking at the value chain, and, can you make a business case for that? And then looking at the subsidies. I just want to use this opportunity and leave you with a parting thought. It was very interesting from an IFAD East and Southern Africa perspective, talking to the South African government who we work with, and how, because of the water stress in Southern Africa, they've had to revisit their export model. And it actually looked to say, okay, if we are exporting fresh juice, box juice, how much water is in that? If we're exporting an orange, a fresh orange, how much water is in that? What commodities should we be exporting? Do we need to revisit our export model path? And I think this also speaks to the NDC partnership, looking at how would you invest and what are you going to invest in, and how does that transition pass through? And I think in that sense, South Africa is really leading and really looking at the water, soil, energy mix of their exports if they're going to get their agriculture to the next level and ensure that they're able to fill their plates sustainably. So this is really key. It just becomes that level of practicality in trying to connect these thoughts together to build something in the very short term, transition plan, and then medium-term planning into some of these aspects that we're talking about. So I would just like to collectively thank our panelists, a lot of food for thought, but lots of concrete, excellent ideas that have been put forward to them. Thank you very much. Round of applause. Thank you. Thank you for that. So we've come to the end of our session, and we will come to another one. Please stay for the next session here. Thank you, Marianne. Very nice to meet you. Thank you.